You manage 51 member states, 50 member states in the United States to the President of the United States. And in the end, all of the system is much less centralized in Europe. You do that through the President of the European Commission and the Council and the Parliament. And you have to learn to work that system. It's frustrating. By the way, you don't think people are frustrated with the United States when they come and look at it? It's the same problem. And it's a reality. You have to deal with it. And I think in the end, Trump and Ursula von der Leyen will settle this. It cannot be done through individual member states, as you know. Just because you have Germany and France and Italy, it helps a lot, but it doesn't help Romania. It doesn't help. You don't think Romania and Poland and the Baltic states, the Benelux countries have their own opinions about this? Yeah. And they do, and they will exercise them. And each one of them has a veto in the European Council.
You mentioned the thing about the fogginess of the Trump administration. I guess one could ask, there's Donald Trump there, and who else is weighing in heavily, in your opinion? You have private individuals, you have officials, you have a whole array of consuls. What's your view on that?
That's something you need to ask Adrian. I don't know how that system works. I think the Secretary of State plays a significant role. He's also now the acting national security advisor. He's a very talented guy. Mm-hmm. The extent to which he's an independent actor is not clear to me. But that was true in the Biden administration, too. I mean, the preeminent foreign policy person in the Biden administration was Tony Blinken, but Jake Sullivan had a lot to say as well. And Biden was very good about listening to different points of view. Uh-huh. I think Trump has got his own opinion and is much more, makes up his own mind. I always found it incredibly naive in Romania that people were, and I will not get into names, but you know who they are, would claim that they could bring Donald Trump around on visa waiver or this or that. And I thought to myself, I don't know a lot about Donald Trump, but nobody has Donald Trump in their pocket. You could be sure of that. And I think that's part of the problem is that Trump himself has his own very strong views of this. And actually on Romania, he doesn't have a deep education on Romania. The difference between him and Biden had been to Romania 4 or 5 times. He had actually lived it. And long before I was there, he was there. He had been there 2 or 3 times before I came to Romania.
He knew everybody's by first name, too. Many of the leaders.
Yeah, he did. He did, yes. I learned that the hard way. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned you paid high tribute to the president of the EU. Who leads Europe in let's say in country terms? Is it Britain? Is it Germany? Is it France? Is it all 3? What do you make of that?
Well, Britain is no longer a member of the EU. So, I think the 3 most powerful countries, but just because of the sheer size, would be Germany, France, and Italy. Yeah. But listen, Romania and Poland are major players. They come in, I think, 4th and 5th in that list. And they are not only important economically, they're important militarily. Both Poland and Romania on the northern flank, it's Poland, on the southeastern flank, it's Romania. I mean, what was at stake in the Romanian elections was not simply the EU, it was NATO. I mean, there are 10,000 NATO troops right now at MK Air Base in Constanța. You have the missiles in Devaselu. There was talk, there probably still is talk about putting another 10,000 NATO troops in Chincu. It's a big player in NATO. Romania is, and Poland is spending more on defense as a percentage of GDP, I think, than even the United States.
4.5 or something. Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very high, and they're very committed to supporting the NATO alliance against Russia.
So you see no backing off from taking the import of what you're saying, a U.S. backing off of NATO support. Obviously.
Well, no, I think that's a story yet to be told. I don't know if there is if there's a serious incursion by the Russians, what happens under Article 5, that's a unanimous vote. It's a very hard thing to manage. I thought that a very dangerous moment, although I understand and actually support what the Ukrainians did when they sent those missiles at, a third of the strategic bomber force of Russia. If we had gotten to a serious NATO challenge to NATO during that period by the Russian response, I was nervous about it. And I don't know what would happen in that circumstance. I think U.S. leadership in NATO, my friend Julie Smith, who was U.S. ambassador to NATO, and I spent many hours on the phone talking about these issues, and I know how difficult it is to manage NATO, and it takes strong leadership from the United States. It's just not clear to me what's going on there, and I'm not an expert on NATO. I mean, you should be asking Julie Smith these questions, Ivo Dalder. You should try and get the new ambassador on the phone if you can.
And he's a mystery figure as far as I can tell. Anybody, I've been sort of sending emails around. But you mentioned Article 5, and Richard Haas said in an interview that only 1% of Americans know what Article 5 is. What do you make? I think that's actually probably true, no?
1% know what Article 5 is, maybe 5% know what NATO is, 2/10 of 1% know what the European Union is. By the way, just as a fact, it was not created to discriminate against the United States. I want to say that on this program, some people say, it was not created for that purpose. It was the purpose of the European Union. With the reason the European Union was created was every war that has been fought in Europe in the last 100 years has been between Germany and France. Mm-hmm. The purpose of the European Union was to get both countries in the same organization, integrated from an economic point of view, so we could stop the wars in Europe. It is, until the Ukraine situation, it's pretty much succeeded, but that's because they have become economically integrated. Now, do we pay a price sometimes for their trade policies? Absolutely, and we should respond to that, and they should accommodate us. But that's not the purpose of the European Union. I think most Americans, if you would ask them what the European Union was, they probably thought it was a trade union or an art coalition, or they don't know what it is.
Right. Well, I guess they can be forgiven. They don't even know. Many don't even know where Ukraine is. I think they have a better idea where. Do you think the Europeans can pull together sufficient military equipment guarantees to keep Zelensky's battle viable and continuing?
Also yet to be determined. They have to try. They have no choice but to do this. I think Trump is right to say they need to step up, and they are beginning to step up in all sorts of ways. And I think the military-industrial complex, defense base in Europe is atrophied in large measure because we have provided the umbrella for them, and that needs to change, and that will change. By the way, I think Romania will benefit from that because Romania has a history, as does Ukraine, of building military equipment, and they could rebuild that industrial base, and I think that would be good for both countries from a security and an economic point of view.
Kissinger said, you were quoting Kissinger a moment ago, he said that usually history shows that if the principals are not at the table negotiating a peace or solution, then it usually doesn't work out. And I guess implying that it should be Zelensky and Putin and less everybody else. What do you make of that comment?
Well, I think it has to be Zelensky and Putin, the EU, the United States. They all have to be involved. And the reason the EU needs to be involved, and not simply, first of all, people don't understand this. The military equipment that was getting to Ukraine was, to a substantial sense, American military equipment, which, by the way, benefited a lot of Americans because we were building the equipment all over the United States, and it was helping our economic recovery. But it was also member states of the European Union. 27 member states were supplying some sort of military equipment. That was actually being done through the EU in cooperation with the European Command, not NATO. And the extent to which that military equipment was being sized and allocated and managed by our Secretary of Defense and the military, you know, the various agencies within the 27 member states that manage military equipment. That was being coordinated by the EU, by the European Command. I mean, the U.S. military commanders were very much involved in that decision, but it wasn't formally NATO. So having the EU involved, it's not simply a matter of getting equipment, but getting resources to Ukraine. And the other thing to remember is the biggest chunk of resource was actually the sovereign assets, which actually sit in banks in Belgium. So it's not, you know, they have to be involved in this too. It's what, $300 billion. So, you know, this is a substantial amount of money. You know, we found a clever way of accessing those assets by not giving them up, by not seizing those assets. But they need to be players in this as well.
Are the European countries, I mean, if you live in Portugal, you don't fear, you know, too much Putin. If you live in Poland, it's a whole different ballgame. Is there, in a sense, two European attitudes, those people in the Baltics on the front line, so to speak, that have a lot at stake, and everybody else, or at least far Western Europe?
Sure, although that's a lot of countries that are right on the, you know, all the Baltics are on there, Poland, Hungary, actually, but certainly the Western Balkans and Romania. That's a lot of countries. That's almost half of the European Union member states. The Germans, in particular, have big investment interest in this. So,
well,
if you're in Ireland, or if you're in Portugal, you're less interested. If you're in Malta, maybe. The total size of the GDP and the population that are engaged in this issue, it's at least half of the European Union.
Excuse me, I'm not hearing Mark's voice well. Is Raluca, are you okay? Are you hearing everything well?
Yeah, Mark, maybe you can come closer to the microphone. Yes.
How does that sound? Better?
A little bit better.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
So you haven't heard anything of a pullback, because that's what from Devaselu or Black Sea or anything. There hasn't been any pullback by U.S. presence in Romania that would cause you to feel a little uneasy.
I would have felt very uneasy if Simeon had won.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a real risk on that regard. And from a security point of view, that was a big factor. But I don't see that now. I don't see that happening.
Another parlor game in Bucharest, it seems to be that which West European country has most influence on the new administration here in Romania. And obviously the French seem to have a bigger say, in as much as the president was educated in France and he has a strong Francophile type of thing. Do you think France would be the more influential country in the way that Germany is to the Baltic countries or to the north?
Hard for me to assess. I think they have a lot of influence. But, you know, Nicolas Dan doesn't seem to me to be the kind of guy that is overwhelmed by any foreign leader. He seems to be his own man. He's a mathematician. I think that's one thing you need to understand. Somebody pointed this out to me. He's very careful and he thinks through things, you know, in a very sort of logical way, as any mathematician would. And I think that's healthy. And I think people are frustrated by this negotiation that's going on now, but you can be sure he's thought through all the angles. And hopefully it'll get to the right result. A lot of that depends on the establishment parties, which have to stop being tribal and start thinking about what's best, primarily what's best for Romania than what's best for their networks, if you know what I mean.
What do you make of what happened in Poland just recently with the election there?
I quite frankly was surprised that the Tusk candidate failed. I thought he was going to win. I think it shows you that that the right-wing forces in Poland have tremendous influence.
Mhm.
I don't know what role media played in that or what role social media played. The irony is that in the parliamentary elections, a year or so earlier, Tusk won rather decisively.
Mm.
So I don't know what to make of what happened in Poland. I think I was disturbed by it, quite frankly.
In your years in Brussels, you obviously met with many different leaders and you over the course of your life. Can you think of any foreign leader that gave you some really incisive, useful advice about the way the U.S. ought to conduct itself, or something that sort of sat in your mind for a while?
Well, as I said, I was very impressed with Ursula von der Leyen.
Yep.
She was, I'll tell you what her real value, she was very, very good in terms of, I was in a lot of conversations between her and President Biden. And Biden always listened very carefully to what she said. And she was very honest with Biden. I mean, we had long arguments about the Inflation Reduction Act and the way Europe responded to the Buy America provisions. And they both had an honest colloquy about it. And it was fascinating to watch because Biden was determined to, on the one hand, rebuild green tech in the United States and do it in a way that benefited workers. And I think what the insight that von der Leyen brought to this was, look, I agree with some of that. Indeed, we need to do some of that in Europe. But you need to understand how this complicates politics in Europe when you do things like this, whether it's AUKUS or the Inflation Reduction Act, when Europeans feel that they were not taken seriously. And I think she was very straightforward with Biden about that, and Biden heard her. It didn't change his position on the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep.
And the EVs, the electric vehicles and their taxes, et cetera, tax credits. But it was, I just liked that candor on her part. And she helped me understand what I would not necessarily have otherwise understood is the sensitivity that Europeans had towards being treated fairly by Americans.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Joe Biden there. I guess it's only normal to say, how's he doing? Do you know anything more about his health? You're a longtime friend of his.
Well, I've actually spent more time with him in the last 2 months than I did the whole 4 years when he was president. He's very much involved in writing his memoirs, very energized by it. And he wants to tell his story, which I think he should do. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's keeping him busy. I've had 2 long lunch and a dinner with him, each of them 2 or 3 hours. I came away feeling good about him personally and in terms of his state of mind. I'm worried about the most recent diagnosis. We didn't actually talk much about it. Yeah. He's pretty private when it comes to those sorts of things. Yeah. But like, he's a friend, and I look forward to having many years together with him. I'm down here in Rehoboth now, in Delaware. I helped him choose this house. It's not more than 6 blocks from here. He's not here right now, but I intend to spend a lot of time with him. So.
Well, that's a big plus, particularly if you're going through hard times, and also particularly when you see how his legacy has been kind of under attack from all sides, and I think unfairly. And probably hopefully it doesn't distract him too much from his work. But where do you think the Democratic Party is today?
Well, and this is true whenever you lose the White House and you don't have the bully pulpit of the White House to not only rally the rest of America, but rally the Democratic Party. There is no clear-cut leader of the Democratic Party right now because we are out of power. I think if we take the House or the Senate, I think it's more likely to take the House back in the next midterm elections. That'll change. And I think 2 things will happen. One, Hakeem Jeffries, who will become Speaker, is very impressive, articulate, savvy guy. He'll become a major leader in the party. He already is a major leader, but he will have a bigger platform. And I think the presidential race will begin, and we'll begin to see some powerful new voices. And our primary system tends to select the best and the brightest. And someone will emerge from that. We just have to be patient. And in the meantime, I think the Republicans are making a lot of mistakes. I think this big, beautiful bill is a huge mistake in many respects. Cutting Medicaid in favor of tax cuts for rich people is a very stupid political decision, and they will pay a price for that. You know, I grew up in a small town in Alabama. My father built a hospital for my small town. It was 3,000 people. The nearest hospital in Florala to my hometown is 20 miles away. That hospital closed. The reason it closed is because of Medicaid. Medicaid funding was blocked by the Alabama state legislature. There was no money for Medicaid. Now there's almost 100 rural hospitals around the United States that have closed. There are 70 million Americans on Medicaid. Rural hospitals close, and the beneficiaries of rural hospitals tend to be white MAGA voters. Okay, when that hits them, they're going to say, "Wait a second, we didn't vote for this." Okay. And look, here's the practical impact in my hometown of Florala. When my dad's hospital was operating, if you had a heart attack, you went to the emergency room, they saved your life. Now, if you're lucky, you get in an ambulance and drive 20 miles. That's a half an hour to the nearest hospital. The consequences, you'll die. When that is confronted, that is not a good choice, political choice. It's not only a bad political choice, it's a bad policy choice.
That's absolutely horrifying. And I think you're correct about there'll be a price to be paid for something like this. I want to get you to reflect back a little bit on your life as an ambassador in 2 different locations. You've had 3 different hats. What's more fun, the big picture in Brussels, or the happy family, or I'd say the family of Bucharest?
Well, they're very different. I loved both of them. My heart was clearly in Romania, remained in Romania. That's why I got so involved in this last election. That's why I got so involved with Jim and you and others on Alianta, because I cared deeply about Romania. The job in Brussels was much more stressful. Every morning I would get up after the war started and watch CNN. CNN, as you know, in Europe is very different than it is in the United States. And the coverage of the war was very graphic. And I would get up every morning and say, what can I do about this to stop this war? And so I'd go to the office and work till 10 o'clock at night in secure video calls, working on export controls and sanctions and money and weapons and getting refugees out. And you had a lot riding on your shoulders in getting that done. And so I don't miss the stress. The work was very interesting, and I think we got a lot done. Romania is a heartfelt engagement for me, and I haven't been back to Brussels or Bucharest for a while. I'm more likely to go back to Bucharest before I go back to Brussels, because although I have good friends there, my heart is still in Romania.
You wrote a book when you were a younger man. I forget the name, the title of the book, but I had it here. It was it won some sort of award, a nonfiction book, Matters of Principle. Do you still have the energy and with the interest in writing your memoirs or contributing in that sense, just like your friend Joe down the street?
I've had a lot of people approach me to do this. Winston Churchill used to say this about writing a book. He would say, first it's a mistress, then it's a master, then it's a monster. All I remember about writing that book was the monster stage. it's like
Well,
getting it done.
we won't be expecting to get another book.
A lot of people have told me I should do it. I don't. I think I'll be surprised if I do it. I don't think I will.
Well, it's been.
I have a lot I'd like to say. I think I'd rather do it in small chunks by lectures and op-eds and things like that. Maybe I'll pull them all together someday. I doubt it.
Well, I think you still have a lot to give, and it's been a joy having you here for this short hour. And I want to thank you very much, Mark, not just for this, but particularly for having started Alianta and making it such a successful and energetic organization.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Go on. Bye-bye. Bye for now.